We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. 1-800-Flowers. Share with love.
Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. I'm not satisfied when I learn something new unless I share it forward. And so we created this podcast to continue that, to share forward the wonderful people we get to meet and most importantly get to learn from and make our lives richer and better. Together we'll cover the human experience. And for me, the human experience is foundational in the idea of relationships. The topics will be far-reaching, but common element you'll see here is it's all about relationships. So I invite you to join us on this journey. Come experience it with us, share your thoughts and ideas, and become part of our community. We'd love to have you.
New York University's healthcare system is one of the largest in the country, with 6 hospitals throughout the city that see over 100,000 patients every year. Top ranking for patient safety and quality of care, it's no wonder that NYU Langone has been at the forefront of medical advancement throughout their 180-year history. Today, Dr. Robert Grossman joins us on Celebrations Chatter. Dr. Grossman is one of the world's premier healthcare leaders, best known for overseeing the evolution of NYU Langone Health into one of the top academic medical centers in the nation. As Chief Executive Officer of NYU Langone Health and Dean of NYU School of Medicine, Dr. Grossman leads more than 45,000 employees, students, and non-compensated faculty across New York City and Florida. In 2019, NYU renamed their School of Medicine after Dr. Grossman in honor of his leadership in the historic and unprecedented initiative of providing tuition-free medical education for all current and future students in its MDA degree program. In this episode, Dr. Grossman shares his experience as a healthcare professional and educator leading a cutting-edge facility along with the many challenges he's faced in his career saving lives. Listen here on Celebrations Chatter.
You have the toughest task that I could think of from a leadership perspective. And that is you set those BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals some years ago. You achieved that goal. And that's really hard to do, number one. And number two, what do you do for an encore? From a leadership perspective, I've watched you over the years and admired your leadership style, your partnership with our friend Ken Langone, and how you've divided up the duties and responsibilities and crafted this goal and created a mission at an organization of over 45,000 people to buy in, to wade in, to do their part to make that dream come true. And as our friend Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great, you took a good health system and made it the great health system. And that's really hard to do. And now my question is, how do you reshape your next set of goals?
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words. So getting there is just the beginning, honestly. And the question is, as Jim Collins alluded to, the sustainability. And continuing the dynamism, growing the vision and growing the enterprise. Part of it is having a reasonable strategic plan and then continuing to execute on that plan, being totally focused on what the goals you continue to set. And by that, I mean a lot of institutions, when they achieve, and businesses for that matter, when they achieve success, get defocused.
Yeah, that seems to be a big challenge.
Big challenge. And for us, it's like, okay, we are a wonderful healthcare organization. And people would say, well, Bob, we'd like you to do a hospital here, or we want you to take over this place. Or
well, sure, that's daily, I'm sure.
We want to stay focused. We want to be audacious, but at the same time, we want to grow organically.
Your path was an organic growth path. Certainly the NYU brand was a good brand because of the obvious university, and the health system was a part of it, but an appendage. I wonder what you think or what you know about what the elevation of the health system brand, the iconography of the brand, the media spend, the press reporting on your achievements, and let's talk for a second about those achievements. Vizient, which is one of the agencies that collects all the data on all the health systems around the country, very recently, rated NYU Langone health system the #1 teaching health system in the country, ergo, in my opinion, the world. An amazing achievement. And by all other rankings, all the other services that rank, we're at the very top of everybody's list, in great company with other wonderful brands and institutions. What impact has that elevation of the NYU Langone health system brand had on the NYU brand? With the Grossman School of Medicine being ranked at the highest level now in the world, that's got to inure to the benefit of the NYU brand, no?
Absolutely. We are part of NYU, but we're sort of also separate because health is very different than what the rest of the university does. And the biggest part of our business is actually taking care of patients. And I use the term business as opposed to educational business.
Yes.
I think we've been a tremendous asset to the university, and we have a wonderful partnership with them. But culturally, we are different because we're this big business with a large research component and a relatively small educational component. The university is basically an educational business with small other components, business components. I think with respect to the personalization of what does it mean to have your name on a school, first of all, I was shocked. It was nothing I expected. To this day, I sort of can't relate to it in a normal fashion. And again, I don't focus on my name. I focus more on trying to wake up every day, trying to do the best I can do for the institution.
Well, it's a terrific honor, and one that Ken and Elaine Langone recommended and promoted. And I just thought it was an extraordinary gesture on their part, extraordinarily appropriate recognition of the partnership that you two have forged and the results that you've delivered. I wonder if in your new set of goals, there might not be the idea that rather than 105 students, might there be a larger class size in the future?
We think about that, but basically what we've done is have a second medical school on Long Island.
Which focuses on internal medicine, family practice.
Primary care.
Primary care.
And so we actually are larger by doing that.
Yep.
And we felt that if we were going to focus on primary care, it would be more advantageous to do it on Long Island and create a curriculum that was distinct for those individuals who are excellent, by the way, excellent students who desired from the start to do primary care. So we actually did increase the size of the medical school.
But that also seems to be, hey, what does the community need? And how can we help the community get what they need, primary care physicians, and do it in a way that is all about the best in quality, the best in care. And so you look to check all the boxes, help the community, do what's good for us, do what's good for the brand, and do what's consistent with our mission.
And do it in a way that's that's student-centered. So the problem with increasing the size of the medical school here, a lot of education goes on now on the ambulatory side. So in doctors' offices, it isn't only hospital-based. So you want to make sure the opportunities for the students are excellent. And you don't want 20 students, you want 5 students or 3 students or one-on-one.
I recently went to my dermatologist over at NYU Langone, Long Island, Dr. O'Neill, the head of dermatology, and he asked, "Do you mind if I have one of our students sit in on the exam?" A wonderful young fellow. It was just nice to see.
And by having a partnership and our merger in Mineola, we were able to advance our medical school mission without demonstrably hurting the student experience in Manhattan.
That's terrific. And it seems, the thing that you pointed out the other day about the achievement in all the national rankings was that you consolidate your numbers. Your emphasis earlier about growing organically and the opportunities that present yourself. Some other competing systems around the community, around the country, are all about how do I get as big as I can so that I can dictate terms. And your approach was very different. You resisted doing any mergers, and then one of the early ones you did with Lutheran Hospital in Brooklyn was a troubled hospital in a very troubled community. Maybe you got a little bit more than you bargained for in terms of a turnaround challenge there. What you guys did as a team is say, okay, we have this, we tighten up the belt here, and we're going to buckle down and make this work. And the achievement of consolidating your numbers to achieve the #1 ranking in the country as a health system, including NYU Langone, Long Island, formerly Winthrop, including formerly Lutheran Hospital, now NYU Langone, Brooklyn, which does business in the most densely populated Medicaid zip code in the state, maybe in the country, probably in the country, is a remarkable achievement. But I see the pride on your face, on Ken's face, and on your team's face about having done that. I know you pretty much had to change out all of the leadership and talent there, and you're particularly proud of having done that in a community that's not affluent and delivered an extraordinary level of service. In fact, the only A-rated hospital in Brooklyn. That seems to put a little special strut in your step.
The issue about consolidation is huge because no other health system consolidates all their hospitals. And by not consolidating,
you give an incomplete picture.
Exactly. And it's bad, actually, for equity.
It's not apples to apples.
Exactly. And you can look at the mother hospital and say, oh, this hospital's doing great. And the other hospital has the name on it, but it isn't consolidated. And it's a stepchild.
It was only 10 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago this week, that the New York area was hit by Sandy, and NYU Langone, then with its main campus on the Midtown East Side of New York City, right on the river, got smacked. Tell us a little bit what happened with Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah, so Hurricane Sandy was a catastrophic event that was centered right in the East River, right? And you had a huge storm with a extremely low pressure exquisitely hitting the Kips Bay area at the time of a full moon. And the combination of circumstances was something you couldn't imagine. And within hours, we had 15 million gallons of contaminated water in our basement and sub-basement, which shorted out everything.
All your operating systems.
Everything, nothing, all the secondary systems failed, everything failed. And we had to evacuate 322 patients.
One of them, a fellow by the name of Langone, if I recall.
And Ken Langone had pneumonia here, and I walked up to his room and I said, "Come on, we're leaving." So we had to get him out, but he saw what was going on. It was a tribute to every member of our team. We worked like the devil. Once we evacuated the patients, the rest was the restoration of the institution. And our entire hospital was closed for 59 days. The emergency room was closed for 2 years. 2 years. Early on, our hospital was ringed by boilers. And most of us were here 7 days a week for about 9 months every day. We were working and solving the problems as a team. You know, one of the points that came out about, and very important in leadership, in my opinion, we said we were going to focus on making lemonade, and we weren't going to use Sandy as an excuse. So we didn't want to hear about, you know, we can't do this because of Sandy. We were going to say, let's look at the future, and we are going to be a stronger hospital system after we emerge from Sandy. And that's exactly what happened. And one of the other things that we did was right from the beginning, people were afraid they were going to lose their jobs, lose their pay. We guaranteed everybody's salary right away, took it right off the table. That portended tremendous loyalty in the system, gratitude. People banded together. They, again, worked like the devil. Ken was a champion. He and I, you know, spoke sometimes 20 times a day. And you were really dealing with so many facets. You're dealing with the government, you're dealing with private industry, construction, plumbers, electricians, you name it, because everything was gone.
I'm going to guess that tragedy, which you turned the lemons you handed into lemonade, that was probably the defining moment of that team you put together, coming together and really becoming a team.
Yeah, I think it was the test of the team. When the tide goes out, you see who wasn't wearing a bathing suit, right? That when things are going great, you don't need anybody. You know, the place functions on its own. But when there's a catastrophe, leadership is important. Everybody has to be on deck. Everybody has to be pulling their own weight. You know, there's no time for whining. It's a time for doing. Any decision is better than no decision. You know, all the pettiness, usual interactions amongst human beings has to stop, and you need to move forward. And the team,
you can't suffer the nonsense. You got to be focused.
Everybody did that, and it was a magnificent effort. Honestly, it was something to behold, and it was sustainable because it didn't happen. It wasn't like a week later, everything's great. This thing took 2 years really to work its way out.
Now, one of the things that you hadn't mentioned yet, people might not realize the scale and scope of the research efforts at NYU Langone. Give us a little idea, and then in particular, how disproportionately impacted the research at NYU Langone was impacted by Sandy?
Our research portfolio was growing by leaps and bounds. And I would say today, just to make a point, today we have more research dollars, NIH research dollars than any per investigator than any other system. But what happened with Sandy, here we are in a huge growth phase. We have all these investigators. All the mice in the mice facility, in the animal facility, died. The animal facility was wiped out.
What a setback.
Unbelievable. So we had
all these experiments, all this research midstream wiped out.
Wiped out. Not all the mice, I should say, but a very large portion. Our animal facility was wiped out here. So what we had, you know, they had to start from scratch. We partnered with NIH. Actually, Chuck Schumer was incredibly helpful. Give him a shout out, as was Eric Cantor. NIH recognized the unique problem our investigators had and partnered with us. But it was slow.
Research scientists, something approaching 600?
Yeah, maybe more than that, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you had, you know, all of them. Well, you have the basic branch scientists, you have the clinician scientists. Everybody's research was affected. On the clinical side, you just stopped. So if you're doing a clinical trial, you're not accruing any patients.
So from a leadership point of view, you have this tragedy before the system, places closed. I didn't realize this until I heard Ken say it the other day, that there was quite a bit of speculation about whether the hospital would ever reopen. Could they overcome this tremendous setback? I hadn't recalled that. But you rally the troops and you say, we're going to come out of this. We're going to come out of this bigger and better. During this comeback, we're going to improve the quality of our care, deepen the team, and strengthen ourselves as a management team. And indeed, you did all of those things. So you set goals. You showed leadership. You were there every day yourself with your team on the front line saying, we are going to come back. You guarantee the fact that everyone's job would be protected and their income wouldn't be compromised. So it seems like the building blocks of great leadership and tragedy recovery were put in place very early on.
Leadership in a crisis is about visibility, communication, authenticity, execution, and deliverables.
Authenticity is something that comes up a lot in conversation around leadership, and I hear it a lot around NYU Langone. You exude authenticity, determination, authenticity. Ken does the same from the board perspective. And you talk a lot about leadership. You talk about the difference between a not-for-profit system and a government system and how they can and do work so differently. Values are different, performance is different. A little bit of color there, because here you run one of the most important institutions in the city of New York, both academically and clinically, and of course from a research perspective too. And the city is suffering under a wave of increased crime in reality and even more so in perception. I know you communicate with Mayor Adams and his leadership on a regular basis, and we know very publicly that your friend David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, in a public way talked to Mayor Adams about his people don't feel safe getting on the subway to come to their headquarters building at a time when he's asking them all to come in. Talk to us a little bit about the different kinds of systems and how they can work effectively, and how you try and be effective within a system that's challenged around you and keeping your people safe.
Right. Well, we're very concerned, obviously, about the safety of our community and try to ensure it. For us, we're 24/7, so the streets have to be safe because we have shifts coming in and out. It's not like you can work 9 to 5 and lock the door and everybody goes away. And, you know, what we're seeing, which is terrible, is also assaults on healthcare workers. You know, we have mental illness is an enormous problem in the city and in the state and throughout the United States. And we haven't effectively dealt with mental illness. We haven't dealt with homeless. We haven't dealt with the violence, gun violence, other crimes. Our health system is highly correlated to the success of the city. What's good for New York City is good for NYU Langone. Having said that, you know, it's a complicated political environment. And I know Mayor Adams, I met with him on a number of occasions. I think he's trying to do the right thing. He's a terrific guy, really terrific. But it doesn't happen overnight. We have to reverse 8 years of policies that are made New York much less safe and livable. And we want to attract populations to come here. We don't want them to leave, which means we have to change, you know, and evolve the structures to make it attractive. And if it's attractive for people to live in the city, and city living is wonderful, and you have the benefit of having the highest quality of healthcare in the United States, probably in the world, in New York.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com. Find the perfect gift.
And wow the people you love.
Wow. This is amazing. Whether you want to say happy birthday, so cute,
Or I love you.
I love you too, thinking of you.
Wow.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com. Celebrate the people you love.
And so this place culturally, the food, everything is great. And we just have to get the things that you were talking about, the social issues, under control. cities have to be safe. Transportation has to be safe. People have to want to be out at night, enjoying themselves, all the things that make New York the greatest city in the world. And Florida is wonderful and great, but you look at what happened in Fort Myers. Sometimes these nirvanas aren't so great, and there are some warts in New York and everything, but it is a great, great city. And I think, honestly, the mayor is a wonderful, great guy.
In your interpretation, that is, he's well-intentioned and wants to do the job.
100%. That's my interpretation. I know he wants to do, and I'll tell you one thing about him. And you meet a lot of politicians. I'm sure you do, right? So he came up to my office and we were talking about health and everything. He took notes. He wanted to learn about and understand healthcare. It wasn't he came to tell me about healthcare.
Yeah, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of notes, he should take notes, because I did. When we were early in COVID, that would be spring of 20, we were at a board call, a Zoom board call. And at the end of the call, there were just a few of us left on. And I asked you, because I know you're farsighted and always looking around the corner, what's coming next and being prepared for evolution and revolution in healthcare. And you made some off-the-cuff predictions back then, all of which have come true. And the ones I can remember off the top of my head, I think in March of 20, as a system, we were doing just a few hundred telemedicine visits a day. And you said that would explode and never go back in the jar. And I think we're up around 14 or 15,000 telemedicine visits a day today. So that check mark came true with a star. You also mentioned how private practices, traditional doctors' private practices, would become more and more difficult because of the technology requirements. Doctors' practices needed to be associated with teaching medical centers because it's about access. And who'd want to go to a doctor who didn't have access to the best in terms of teaching health systems? You also said that you questioned, and I don't know where we are in this one, I know on Long Island, we had to move the maternity practice out of the hospital. We converted an office building nearby into a temporary maternity center. And people and moms and dads and families really liked it. I wonder, you weren't sure at the time if maternity would ever return to the hospital. I'll ask you where you think we are in that one now. And so just up and down the line, you predicted that medicine would change dramatically as a result of COVID. You were also very concerned about the number of people who would have gone for treatment or testing and then treatment for different kinds of cancers, for example, who weren't going to the health system because they were frightened. And you were concerned about the pig in the snake, so to speak, of people who weren't getting diagnosed, therefore weren't getting treatment.
Mother-baby hospitals and separation of wellness is a trend that's going to continue. Now, what's interesting, I have to say, what's interesting post-COVID here, the number of live births in Manhattan has actually gone down.
Gone down?
Yeah, gone down. And I think, people migrated to the suburbs, they're young people.
Yes.
I think it's going to come back, but it's not where...
Not fully back yet, huh?
The big systems have large networks, and the networks want to keep all the referrals. So standalone hospitals are going to have a much harder time.
Yes.
And I think you've seen that now, particularly in cancer hospitals and other standalone facilities. It's very difficult to be out of a network. And that's also the case for small hospitals. So, Long Island Community Hospital was a standalone hospital for a while, and they figured they can't survive that way. That's another, aspect of COVID. And the other thing that's hurt some of the major hospitals in the United States has been the decline in travel medicine. So if your margin is from travel medicine and people weren't traveling with COVID, and then they figured out they could just as easily get great care locally as flying to the Mayo Clinic, that's going to have a negative effect.
Sure, I never thought of that one.
I think the referral patterns and the practice of medicine has changed forever. And the field that was most affected is psychiatry and child psychiatry, because the vast majority of that can be electronic.
And you have, the system has a fabulous leader in our psychiatry, Dr. Mamar, who runs one of the largest psychiatric practices in the country, such a forthright thinker. And the idea of different treatment modalities. I remember him making a comment during the throes of the pandemic where he addressed the board and he said, I have good news and bad news kind of scenario. Good news is the psychiatry department is as busy as can be. The bad news is we don't have to leave our offices because all our patients are our coworkers.
Absolutely. And, COVID exacerbated the mental health crisis in this country. The connectivity by isolation, the connectivity was lost. It increased depression and other psychiatric illness. It brought it to the front.
I wonder if in the early days you're seeing any of the benefits of remote psychiatric services where you can treat people more effectively, more quickly, more frequently, at shorter spurts through digital contact.
I think so. What I know for sure is the accessibility, because of that, has had a positive effect on students particularly. When I went to medical school, I didn't know anybody. Maybe I knew one or two people who sought psychiatric help. 40% of the class, I understand, has engaged at one level or another mental health counseling.
Well, I think I'm going to guess two things. One is the stigma is gone, and that's a good, healthy thing that people feel comfortable reaching out for help when they know it'll be beneficial to them. And the second thing is people are having bigger challenges because of the complications you just described of natural life here in the city and COVID.
And how to deal with stress.
The next challenge I know that you're concerned about is with those 600 plus researchers who work for Dr. Daphna there, doing all the great work that they're doing. The NYU Langone Health System under your leadership was recipient of a very large NIH grant to coordinate all the national research efforts related to long COVID. And I've heard your clinical leaders talk about their concern about long COVID and what we'll be dealing with for the next 10 years. Give us shine a little light on that so important a subject. How should we be thinking and expecting we'll be dealing with this for the next decade?
Well, the first thing I would say to every listener, make sure you're fully vaccinated. Fully vaccinated.
Thank you. Got my fourth one the other day.
There you go. But that is critical. You want to prevent getting long COVID. And you definitely want to prevent hospitalizations because the probability of getting long COVID increases with the severity of the disease and hospitalization clearly.
Well, hospitalization doesn't call it. It's just emblematic of the fact that you have a more serious case of the disease.
That you can get long COVID and not be hospitalized, but if you're hospitalized, there's a higher probability of getting long COVID. And it's a terrible problem. So COVID had a plethora of manifestation. It had lung problems, it had kidney problems, heart problems, brain problems, thrombotic problems. We're seeing some of these issues brought to life even now. So somebody who will remain nameless, who I think you know, had COVID twice, and the second time had terrible clotting problems and developed something called antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, which has a propensity for clots and stroke. So this person has to be on anticoagulation now, probably for the rest of his life. There's also, risks of continued clotting, premature coronary artery disease, decreased kidney function, all
Heart
these.
wall inflammation. So here's this fellow from the Bronx who decides they're going to go and become a doctor. One residency wasn't enough. You had to do two. And being a clinician and a practitioner was wonderful. But then you said, wait a minute, I can impact healthcare in a bigger way, in a broader way by becoming a teacher and an administrator. And you've done all of those things. What's left on your list now of things that you want to achieve in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't know how you are, but for me, I've been in the moment all the time. So yeah. I never thought about the next new thing, honestly. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I'm thinking of, what we're doing now and how I'm going to execute it. And I'm not thinking, 5 years, 3 years from now. I mean, I'm thinking business-wise what to do. But personally, the way I don't think about what I've accomplished in the past, I think about what I'm trying to do in the future. I'm in the moment, and my wife would say, I'm the least introspective person she knows.
I think she's pulling your leg. Now, we talked about the Grossman School of Medicine at NYU. The big thing that happened there is just a few years ago, you and Ken announced at the white coat ceremony at the graduation, going forward, there would be no tuition. The place erupted. Families were crying. People were screaming. And then you went further to say, and for those of you who are already here in your second or third year, and of course you engineered, designed, and revolutionarily changed the curriculum to make it a 3-year curriculum rather than 4, getting highly trained clinicians who are having clinical exposure from their first day of class. That changed the system. It's changing how people look at medical education around the country, around the world. I know a couple of institutions have since mimicked. I know we've both kidded Ken Langone, who took a few years to raise that money to endow the school so that you could do just that. And then just a week later, I think it was Johns Hopkins had a single benefactor named Michael Bloomberg write them a check so that they could do it. And we all kidded Ken, said, Ken, it took you 3 years. Michael Bloomberg and Johns Hopkins only took 4 days. How do you think that will reverberate around medical healthcare nationwide, maybe worldwide?
So first of all, thank you for bringing that up. What's happening to our students was that they were graduating with this enormous debt burden, and they weren't any different than any other students around the country going to medical school. The average debt for a student in medical school was $200,000 a year. If you married a medical student, it's $400,000, $500,000 a year. So I thought it was a moral imperative to become tuition free. And, I was a scholarship kid, and I knew what it was to live from hand to mouth. And the kids here, you could tell when you offered food for a conference and lunch, everybody showed up. And they were living on the margin. Their parents were working like crazy to help support these kids. And it was just...
So it goes way beyond the individual student.
And it took us 12 years to get the corpus to be able to support the tuition free. But it affected the students. So the students said, when you told them, the most important thing, it decreased anxiety. Decreased anxiety. It gave, the students would comment for the first time, my parents had a vacation. So we changed the trajectory of the students, their entire families forever. And think about how many patients that will ultimately affect. And you're exactly right. We wanted a lot of copycats because it wasn't only about us, it's about the country. But unfortunately, it's a difficult thing to do. And, you know, the average life expectancy of a dean is 4.5 years. When you have somebody like Ken Langone, who's your chairman, and it took us 12 years to do it, it's very difficult. And it means focusing on this particular issue as opposed to using philanthropy for other things. It was that important for future doctors to graduate with the minimal amount of debt. Now, one thing, we were criticized for giving it to everybody. And I thought the criticism was nonsense. You have no idea.
I've heard you state that quite a few times.
You have no idea about context. Yeah. You don't divide, you know, you could have parents. So doctors, you would think, should be able to support their kids. But a lot of doctors say, I've supported my kids. Now it's my time, you know, let them take on some debt. And so it was the middle class that were really being affected. And for the few very wealthy students, their parents could give back the money. And the other thing, the other criticism, which was also fallacious in my opinion, was that we should only give it to those who want to go into primary care. That means that you're strong-arming people to go into something that they may have gifts that would make them more successful in another field, and we weren't going to do that.
But behaviorally speaking, I would assume that the system prior to that change was pushing people students into specialties because specialties do make more money, but because they needed to make more money to cover the debt. So you had behavioral dynamics that were causing a distortion in the selection of areas of practice. Maybe.
I think it's more complicated than that. I think there are certain...
I'm a simple guy, Doc.
Yeah, no. You got it. But first of all, you look for somebody's talents. And different fields require different talents. You know, in radiology, I'm a radiologist, and I think I see things differently.
And also a neuroradiologist.
A neuroradiologist. And there are certain people who are incredibly smart who just don't have that visual aspect to what they do. Yep. Other people are incredibly artistic and, you know, they want to do plastic surgery. Mm-hmm. Other people, you know, are interested in the nervous system or the GI system, and they don't want to be constrained to do primary. So I think some of it was the pull of the various specialties as opposed to the pure financial aspects of it. Although I think finances in some cases did matter. And then it was also a question of lifestyle. So a lot of internal medicine, primary care, you know, people did not particularly enjoy, this was in the 80s and 90s, taking care of patients, HIV patients. You know, this was before a cure, so they migrated out of medicine. And I think there were always that type of nuance, you know, what you want to take care of and what you don't want to take care of.
The two researchers who developed the Pfizer vaccine platform for the mRNA vaccine expressed some confidence that they would have a cancer vaccine within the decade. Your thoughts?
You know, this isn't a new idea about a cancer vaccine. So
but it's a new platform. Not new. It's a 20-year-old platform. But we're thinking about the mRNA platform in a very different way now, aren't we?
Yeah, but basically the idea is the same in terms of immunization against a cancer which has different antigens than your normal body. Look, you have the CAR T treatment, which is sort of, you know, works. It's sort of analogous, which has been very successful. So it's very possible. It would be great what you could do in the mouse, you could cure cancer in the mouse. If it worked in humans, it would be unbelievable, but it doesn't work that way.
You're so generous with your time. I've so enjoyed watching you, seeing you and your team and all that you've accomplished, creating the #1 health system in the world, in my opinion, and that's backed by data. Created a tuition-free medical school, 9,000 plus applicants for 105 positions. That's remarkable and must frustrate you too. Creating the medical school at the NYU Langone, Long Island campus for primary care, where their tuition is forgiven too with practice. 53% of the class now being female, one of the best diversity metrics in the health education system worldwide. The culture and the pride of your people that you've developed, the curriculum innovations that you've introduced, producing more and better and more quickly a set of professionals that are going out into the world and helping us all. It's a remarkable achievement. I can't wait to visit with you again in the not too distant future and see what else you've done, because I know you're not slowing down.
Well, listen, first of all, thank you for the most kind words and for your friendship and support. It means a lot to me. I know you've been a great supporter, and again, tremendous. And
I confess to being a huge fan.
Well, thank you. Ditto. And you have I'm grateful to you too. Really.
And we are to you. Thank you, doctor.
It's my sister's birthday.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
They have tons of great birthday gifts.
Wow.
Wow.
Happy birthday, baby.
Wow.
Yummy. I got to contain myself.
1-800-Flowers.
Celebrate the people you love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.